السادة الحضور، سوف تبدأ الآن أعمال الجلسة الخامسة والأخيرة بعنوان مكافحة الجرائم الإلكترونية والمالية الدور الرقابي. يسرني دعوة السيد وولفغانغ إنجل لإدارة الجلسة، والمتحدثون فيها هم السيد شوقي أحوش، السيد عباس أبو دياب، الدكتورة توبا أكرم، والسيد رالف ستوبويزر. نطلب من السادة المتحدثين التكرم بالصعود إلى المنصة.
Good afternoon again, and thank you very much for joining us in our last session today, session number 5. It's the last session, but it's a very important session, combating financial crime. And we're going to be talking about the role of the regulators. I've introduced myself. My name is Wolfgang Engel, but I'd like to briefly introduce to you the team of experts who are going to be discussing this topic with you. Let me start with Dr. Toba Akram. Toba is a financial crime and compliance expert, and she has been active as a consultant and advisor for many years. Toba has had roles in academia, in regulatory authorities, and also in international firms. Abbas Boudiab, the executive manager and head of compliance and AML at Bloomberg here in the region. Abbas has many years of professional experience in the banking industry, and he also spent 10 years with Deloitte. Shawki Awash. Shawki is an expert. He is an advisor and a consultant on CFT, on sanctions. He's a former banker, and he is an expert on cross-border payments and investigations, on KYC operations, customer onboarding, and last but not least, AML, CFT, and sanctions. And of course, my colleague Ralf Stobwasser, partner with Deloitte. He is head of the firm's financial crime advisory, and Ralf has been advising many firms here in the region, public sector and private sector, and he has also been advising firms globally on financial crime aspects. Combating financial crimes. So why do we need to do that? In today's very interconnected and rapidly evolving financial landscape, the fight against financial crimes remains very important. We must acknowledge the changing nature of financial crimes and the critical roles that regulators basically play in addressing them and address them effectively. Recent developments in combating financial crimes and AML have underscored the need for enhanced regulatory frameworks and particularly international cooperation. With the emergence of new technologies and complex financial instruments, regulators face new challenges in staying ahead of sophisticated financial crimes and criminal activities. The adoption of robust standards, such as those outlined by FATF, is important to ensure a coordinated global response to these threats and challenges. One of the key areas demanding attention is clearly combating cybercrime. This poses significant risk to the integrity of the financial markets globally. The fight against bribery and corruption requires an approach where regulators collaborate closely with financial institutions and other market participants to identify and address vulnerabilities. Combating financial crimes requires a very strong approach, with regulators at the forefront to ensure compliance with very strong regulations. We have assembled here a fantastic team of experts who will share their insights and also the perspectives on the evolving regulatory landscapes. Toba, let me start with you and ask you the first question. When we want to fight financial crimes or capital market crimes, we also need to look at the market surveillance system, which helps us to detect and also prevent financial crimes. Where do you see the opportunities, the challenges, and the current issues, and perhaps also the risks?
Thank you so much. First, I would like to thank the organizers and providing me the opportunity to share my experience and perspective on the regulatory side. Opportunities always come with the challenges, right? And a robust market surveillance system is a need of time to detect and prevent financial crimes. That not only includes market manipulation, group manipulation, insider trading, but also the organized crimes of money laundering and terrorism financing. There are a lot of opportunities which can be seen, like conventional one and traditional one. I would like to highlight and emphasize one of the most important opportunity which can be used, that whenever the market surveillance system is developed, it should not only be based on the case studies or the historical data, but also with the collaboration of the academia as well, and the practitioners, like the third parties are always involved. When all of them provides their input to develop a market surveillance system, it is more useful to detect these kinds of the crimes. I just would like to give you an example here. I have observed that most of the market surveillance systems are actually focusing on number of the volumes, number of the trades, or the value of the volumes. But the study shows that the volume or the value of the foreign equity outflows are very important indicator to combat financial crimes or to identify the prevalence of money laundering proceeds to the stock market. So one of the opportunity here is to utilize all the channels when we are developing the market surveillance systems, basically. Because artificial intelligence is definitely there. And secondly, continuing to that, the use of artificial intelligence system in like real-time monitoring is equally important, and it's an opportunity. And most of the time, the apex regulators avoid to be the custodian of the real-time monitoring tools. Most of the time, the custodians are the frontline regulators, because it brings a lot of responsibility, whoever is the custodian of real-time monitoring tools, basically. So the most important, like considering it as an opportunity, the challenge here is that with a rapid change in the technology with respect to that real-time monitoring systems, it is very important to get these officers trained in a very frequent manner. So I consider there are a lot more opportunities as well, and which comes with a lot of challenges and risk. But these two are having a very like broad scope.
Abbas, when addressing anti-bribery and corruption, firms are also looking at the risk-based approach. You have been a practitioner for many years. What would you say, how successful is the risk-based approach? What is the aim of it? What could be changed? What could be improved?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Before tackling your question, I would like to define the difference between corruption and bribery. The international coalition defined corruption as the abuse of entrusted power that's given for an individual for personal gain. This includes, for example, power given from one individual or organization to another individual for the personal use or gain of this individual rather than the organization. On the other side, the bribery is defined as offering, promising to offer or giving, something, in return to authorize the bribe given to an official to dominate the official. Coming back to your question, the anti-bribery corruption or the risk-based approach, the aim of the risk-based approach is that you know that it is a method used in many different activities such as anti-money laundering compliance, okay, and it is associated, okay, with risks involved in such activities. The aim is to identify, assess the risks that are related or associated with such activities and to allocate resources in an efficient and adequate way in order to mitigate and minimize the resources. It's here I would like to shed a light on the UK Bribery Act that was issued in July 2011, which says that all commercial entities or organizations should assess their program, the anti-bribery program, and should ensure to what extent they are exposed to the inherent external and internal bribery risks. And the risk assessment that they should conduct should be in a periodic, which means repetitive, informative, and documented. On the other side, we have the USA Foreign Corrupt Practice Act, which was issued in 2010. And it states that the risk assessment on anti-bribery and corruption is a key fundamental for a company. The Department of Justice and the Security Exchange Commission, they give meaningful credit for companies who conduct a comprehensive risk-based approach in order to combat corruption and bribery.
Thank you. Shawki, you have been advising institutions for many years. We have seen recently a number of AML, CFT regulatory requirements that have been introduced to enhance due diligence measures and also supposed to protect financial integrity in the banking sector and in the capital markets. What are these requirements and how effective will they be based on your experience?
Yes, thank you. First, I would like to thank UASA for their cordial invite and the Qatar Financial Market Authority. You know, oftentimes the stocks and security market is often compared or referred to as a battlefield. Why? Because both environments underlie uncertainty, risks, and the potential for either a loss or a gain. That's why for a vibrant capital market to work at its best, it must work for everyone. So what do investors and what does the regulator expect from a capital market ecosystem? There should be the fairness, there should be protection for the investor, there should be also the suitability principle respected in terms of tailoring the investment product to the investor's need. And back to your question exactly, maybe it's good to differentiate between the standards that have been rolled out and the best practices, and maybe then we can come to the regulation that have been issued. There has been much work lately within the FATF, and I guess the previous panel has alluded to that in terms of identification of the ultimate beneficial owner. And that's specifically under R24 and R25, whereby we need to do the right ownership structure analysis to dig for the ultimate beneficial owner, whether on the corporate side or the trust or the legal arrangement side. Another thing is that the transparency of the payment, which is under Recommendation 16, there has been much development for the interpretation note in terms of the travel rule, knowing the right ordering, the right beneficiary, and how VASPs, or the virtual asset service providers, should implement their AML and CFT regimes across the organization. Now, coming back to the regulation, maybe it's a good start to state a little bit about the implication of a US law that has been out 2 or 3 years ago, which is the AMLA Act. One of the implications is on foreign financial institution, which today I guess we represent, and how we should deal with our foreign correspondent in terms of transparency. And the law gives like more room for the correspondent to exercise the due diligence, and it gives the privilege for a subpoena authority, i.e. the correspondent may delve more into your files. So better to be prepared for this. Another thing happening is in the UK, for example, which the region is copying to a certain extent, is the Dear COO letter, which actually makes senior management responsible for the AML-CFT regime rather than attracting business only and profits. Last but not least, and since we are in a capital market authority event, is the FinCEN rulemaking for bringing investment advisors under AML-CFT requirements in terms of filing STRs, in terms of record keeping, and in terms of, establishing a sanction regime. So these are really the gatekeepers in protecting the integrity of capital markets worldwide. So it's always good to scrutinize brokers for the soundness of the capital adequacy they have and how much they practice the due diligence on potential investors that may hide through shell entities, offshore entities, and other vehicles that may be violating or evading sanctions.
Ralph, public and private sector institutions make an effort to actively combat financial crimes. And as part of their efforts, they also do audits, internal audits, external audits. Why do internal audits often fail to detect fraudulent proceeds, especially when it comes to bribery and corruption?
So I think there's a bit of a common misconception here that it is the job of internal audit to detect fraud. And so that's a secondary purpose, undoubtedly, but definitely there's a bit of an expectation gap. Also, similarly so with external audit. So, of course, an organization has to be kind of working in a way to prevent financial crime from happening, and that is all forms of financial crime, either active or passive, i.e. the corporate committing a crime by bribing an official, or a crime being committed on the organization, either through an insider or through an external threat. But let's just think about where things are going wrong. And I'll draw on an example from my native Germany, and so as not to embarrass anybody in this room other than myself and maybe Wolfgang. So if you think about the Wirecard scandal, probably most of you have heard about that. And so this is a payment process company, a listed company in Germany, which was a bit of a star of the German stock market, and that had made up about a third of its business and had overstated its cash in hand by well over €1 billion. So you'd think, and so how can that happen? And so where was internal audit there? Where was external audit? And a lot of focus is on the external auditor in that case. But also, where is the governing body? If you think about the three lines model, or 3 lines of defense model as it used to be called, and so where is the role, where is the governing board, where is the board of directors or its committees, and so in challenging management and getting the right information from the third line of defense, i.e. internal audit. And then if you extend it beyond that, and so you're wondering, and so what is the role of the regulator in all of this, and so where were the oversight bodies, and so who prevented to prevented this financial statement fraud from happening in the first place. So I think, and so that's a bit of a sign that there is a collective failing. But let's just think about, and so maybe from an internal audit perspective, and so just within an organization, and so what is relevant really. And so I think culture is very, very important. So you need to have the right culture in an organization in order to allow flow of information. There needs to be trust, and so there needs to be speak-up channels that people use, etc. And so that will allow better flow of communication. Then, again, from an internal audit perspective, there needs to be independent assurance, and so independence in that assurance function is critical. And that independence can only be guaranteed if there's a direct reporting line to the board or the Audit and Risk Committee. And then I think another important factor here is that there cannot be management override. No? Management override is often, and so like what happens here, and internal audit cannot prevent it because it is being essentially in itself and so sidelined. So I think I'd like to give one example also with a listed company, and so we're conducting an investigation into actually inventory fraud, and so this is how it started. And internal audit had long flagged that. This is not in Qatar, but another GCC country. And so, again, a listed company, retail company, and the issues with inventory had been flagged by internal audit for a while. But nobody had really acted on it, and also the context in which this inventory fraud seemingly happened, and so was actually misunderstood. It ended up being actually a books and records violation. So at the end of the day, it involved financial statement fraud because it was essentially an accounting fraud that led to overstatement of profits. So there are just a lot of complexities, and in a world where there is increasing, let's say, a number of different kind of fraud scenarios, and you have very effective and challenging fraud actors, and so it is difficult for internal audit or any assurance function, internal or external, and so to be absolute. So important always remember and to bring in the specialists if it comes to forensic investigations, and so we can hopefully solve the problem. And so, but important, don't forget prevention and effective detection. Sorry, over to you again.
Tuba, in order to fight financial crimes, regulators and also officers internally need to be empowered, and they need to have substantial evidence for prosecution. There's also one aspect which is cost of filing financial crime prosecution. And there is a dilemma when it comes to small fraudulent cases because the cost is relatively high. How should that be handled, this kind of dilemma?
A very interesting question, as we are from the last panel, and we are observing regulators and regulatory both. And this is the question which is mostly disliked by the regulatory, because when the regulators are more empowered, it is observed by the regulatory in a manner that they think that there is an over-regulation. Because at the same time, regulator needs to uphold the capital market as well, and at the same time, they have to protect the market from the financial crimes as well. So with respect to the cost of the crime, I suggest that there should be, a uniform policy or something, a documentation, or you can say SOPs, which can assess that whether this type of the case requires that much attention or not. Because when there is over-regulation, the market will not be growing to that extent. So it is very important to have a regulations or policy side on that as well. And you were talking about the substantial and circumstantial evidence. So with respect to that, it is very important that the officer should be trained, and that there is a rapid change in the technology. That's why they need to be trained at so much frequent level. But it is really very important that with the empowerment of that regulatory officer, they need to be so much trained to collect the substantial and the circumstantial evidence both. As we know that most of the time, the group manipulation or market manipulation or insider trading, they have the penalty of like punishment and imprisonment. And to convict someone, it is very important that the case should be supported by the circumstantial evidence as well. So here is the case that all of the officers should be enough trained that they can provide that much evidence that someone can be convicted of that crime. And there is a lackness about that in the regulator side as well.
Abbas, let's take a look at the ABC again, anti-bribery and corruption. What are the stages in implementing an ABC risk-based approach?
Actually, there are 6 stages identified in implementing or conducting a risk-based approach for combating bribery and corruption. The first stage is the top-level commitment and oversight. The top-level commitment is key fundamental for implementing an effective and adequate risk-based approach for combating corruption and bribery. And this involves that there should be a board or board committee that should be set up, which is responsible for the oversight of this process. It's to note here that the board committee should have a full understanding about the risks that the company is exposed to. We also have the allocation or assignment of responsibilities. The assignment of responsibilities is very crucial in this aspect, whereby the assignment of responsibilities is given by the board to senior management. Also, we have allocation of resources. The board should ensure that adequate resources in terms of time and the number of persons that are involved in the risk assessment process are ensured. Moreover, there should be objectives that are set, and we are talking about the company's core values and the rules and regulations are complied with. We should ensure the profitability of the organization and the revenue. This is concerning the first stage. The second stage is the planning stage. The planning stage is the fundamental of adopting a risk-based approach. There should be a planning team which assigns the leader of this risk assessment, should identify the stakeholders and should allocate that enough resources are adequate. Moreover, drafting of the risk assessment, communicating the risk assessment with the individuals that are involved in the process is very crucial. During the planning stage, we should identify the types of bribery risks that the organization is exposed to by virtue of the location of the organization and the nature of activity of the organization. Also, on what level, if we are going to do this risk assessment, sometimes we may do it on the regional or high level, or we may go to the activity or business level. It may be limited to such levels. We have to as I told, to identify the types of risks, we should be aware of the factors, or the activities which makes the company exposed to the types of risks. This is as far as the planning stage is concerned. We have to identify the risks that are within the organization. There should be a collective number of risks to be identified, within the organization. Moreover, we have to assess these risks. The assessment of risk involves the adverse impact of such risks on the organization and how much these risks may occur within the organization. The last stage is documenting the outcomes of the risk assessment. This is very crucial to share the outcomes of the risk assessment that we do within the organization. This is very crucial in order to review the anti-bribery program and also it will be taken as an evidence for the authorities in case they want to investigate about the adequacy of the risk assessment process. We have to create a register of the types of the risk identified, where the sources of information gathered come from, okay, and also the internal controls to mitigate the bribery risks. So these are the 6 stages that are involved in the risk assessment process.
Fantastic, thank you very much. As you might have noticed, I was just informed that we have 5 more minutes to go. So my last question will go to all of you, and I'm asking you for a short answer. We have been talking about risk, we have been talking about financial crimes, we have been talking about the fact that the perpetrators are also becoming more sophisticated in terms of designing financial crime methods. So what will be the themes that will dominate the business environment in our region going forward with regard to financial crime activities? Ralph, can we start with you?
So I think in terms of headlines, it will remain money laundering, the countering of the financing of terrorism, sanctions, and also countering the threat through particularly cyber-related fraud. Not even to mention virtual assets, and so which kind of adds another dimension, but we can put that under like money laundering and potentially also sanctions threat. So I think, and so the organizations need to be vigilant across the board, and so, and you have different kind of course, you know, regulators depending on the industry. In terms of capital markets more specifically and securities authorities, I think, and so the importance of AML and CFT has increased. I think previously there was probably, you know, it seemed that the money laundering threat and so seemed lesser versus, say, the threat through an insider trading and market manipulation and so. But cases like, you know, mirror trading, again, to use an example from my native Germany with Deutsche Bank and so, where 10 billion euros went through a laundromat, and so using mirror trading out of Russia and into Western capital markets. Those are examples that I think also regulators need to be aware of in terms of a consistent and constantly, you know, evolving field and remaining dynamic and adaptive with their regulatory rule set. So I think, and so it's the broad threat scenario that needs to be countered. I think, as I said, and so it's still the main headlines will remain. We need to be vigilant across the board. Definitely a convergence there of AML and fraud.
I agree with Raf on all the points, but I would like to add one more theme here regarding whistleblower. So actually, whistleblowing policy is more emphasized on anti-bribery and anti-corruption more. From this platform, I would like to suggest that it should be focused on the capital market, especially in the brokerage houses as well. Because we have seen that most of the crimes happening in the capital market are happening with the help of the employees in the brokerage house system and the equity traders or the more important persons who are dealing with the big investors. So the Whistleblowing Act, particularly focusing in this area, can enhance the financial integrity of that capital market system.
I will add on the whistleblowing. Whistleblowing is very important, and it should be endorsed by the board of directors, because the whistleblowing, it is an added value to the organization, okay, to the organization's success and long-term success, not only the success, long-term success. In terms of the corruption and bribery, we know that we have been facing, and we are still facing, bribery actions and corruption. And there are rules and regulations that are issued, and the organizations should be more adapted to such rules and regulations and an ongoing rules and regulations. The commitment, the board commitment, actually to combat money laundering, financial crimes, and other types of financial crimes is very crucial. And the training is very important. And the control functions role, I mean the internal audit, the compliance, and the risk management is very important in the roles, because they are considered the safety pin and the backbone of the for the safety of the organization.
Yes, I guess recently the region is grappling with two main challenges. First of all is proliferation finance, and we have been seeing this on the level of national risk assessment, and this requires good education and awareness on the side of FIs to be aware of dual-use goods where they may interfere with sanctions, and also to look at restricted goods which are specially enforced or prohibited by the United States, which remains the main source of technology that may be used either for civil or military uses. And so we're seeing more enforcement and more vigilance in this space. Also sanctions, because trading platforms and capital markets can fall in the trap of violating sanctions when they do not exercise the necessary due diligence on investors. And we have seen examples of leading companies that run stocks being subject to OFAC sanctions, paying hefty penalty because their procedure and due diligence was in a bit, falling short of the required job that must have been done.
Thank you very much. This brings us now to the end of session number 5. Please join me in thanking the excellent panelists here, and also please join me in thanking the CEO of UASA and, of course, the Qatar Financial Markets Authority for this fantastic event here in Doha. Thank you.
السيدات والسادة، في ختام هذه الجلسة نكون قد وصلنا إلى نهاية فعاليات المؤتمر. نرجو أن نكون قد وفقنا في إدارته وتنظيمه وتحقيق الأهداف التي سعينا إليها جميعاً من انعقاده. ولا ننسى أن نشكر القائمين على تنظيم المؤتمر، هيئة قطر للأسواق المالية واتحاد هيئات الأوراق المالية، والشكر موصول لجميع المتحدثين والمشاركين. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. والآن ندعوكم إلى تناول وجبة الغداء في قاعة سلوى 1 و2.